Hello! The Earthquake Juggernaut is a very beginner-friendly build, specifically a hardcore beginner-friendly build. It has a lot of defensive capabilities, but it also deals a decent chunk of damage. These defenses consist of a high life pool, 8 maximum endurance charges, and Fortify. Our Ascendancy increases those defenses. Unyielding increases the effect of Fortify on us, and also gives us life regeneration and damage while we have Fortify. Unflinching grants us 1 maximum endurance charge and some endurance charge generation if we are hit by mobs. The Unrelenting node is probably the most important Juggernaut node. It grants 6% increased damage per endurance charge, 8% reduced elemental damage taken while at maximum endurance charges, and a 25% chance that if you would gain endurance charges, you instead gain up to your maximum number of endurance charges. Now that last part is very important because it makes sustaining endurance charges very easy and reliable. The last node I would take from the Uber Lab is the Unstoppable. It's more of a quality of life than actually required. It gives movement speed and you cannot be slowed below base speed. Now, the main links are Earthquake, increased area of effect, less duration, added fire, melee physical damage, and Fortify. If I were to use this on a 5 link, I would take out added fire, and on a 4 link I would remove increased area of effect. For single target situations, you swap out increased area of effect for consecrated area of effect for a lot more damage. Leveling this build, you start off using Molten Strike, Heavy Strike, and Ground Slam is what I used, and when you reach level 12 you can start using Sunder, and finally at level 28 you can start using Earthquake. My advice would be to wait until level 31, because then you can utilize the support gem Less Duration, which is the most important support gem for Earthquake in my opinion. While leveling, you can utilize a lot of good uniques. The Maginord's Girdle Heavy Belt has a lot of physical damage, life, a lot of good stuff for leveling, and I would also recommend Limb Split Wood Splitter, Wide Swing Poleaxe, and then Joffrey's Baptism Brass Mold. For higher level content, the Hrimnor's Dirge is an exceptionally good weapon. It's required level 36. It has high physical damage, 1% leech, and gain 50% of physical damage as extra cold damage, which makes it a good enough weapon to use through entire cruel until you reach your main weapon. The Combs Primacy Courier Chopper. It's a 400 DPS physical DPS axe if you have a good roll with Culling Strike. Culling Strikes executes any target below 10% HP if they take damage. Now, gearing this character in general, you go for high life and resist on pieces, while trying to fit in physical damage in the pieces that you can. You also want physical attack damage leached as mana on at least one of your pieces to sustain your mana without using a mana potion. Other important gem setups for this build is the Ancestral War Chief, melee physical damage, added fire damage, faster attacks. It's mainly used for single target situations, such as the Val Lightning Traps, which drops Shocking Ground, increasing all damage the target takes by 30%. Other than that, the Leap Slam setup is very important. Leap Slam, faster attacks, and endurance charge on melee stun. Now this support link is very important, because you often leap into packs with this build, and when you do, you often stun them, and if you stun a mob when you leap into it, you will generate an endurance charge, and from the passive node Unrelenting, you then have a 25% chance to reach maximum endurance charges. So just leaping into packs gives you a high chance to maximize your endurance charges. You of course want Enduring Cry in your gem setup somewhere as well, and I like to run a Blood Rage myself for Frenzy Charge generation and some Leech. Something I like to take in is a Immortal Call on a self-cast setup. I don't like it in a cast when damage taken setup. What Immortal Call does is that it consumes endurance charges and makes you immortal to physical damage for a while. With 8 endurance charges, it's around 5 to 6 seconds. But since you consume all the endurance charges, you lose a lot of damage and some elemental damage reduction. So I only use it for very specific situations, mainly porcupines. Those are the birds that shoot out spikes when they die. Another important gem setup is Blasphemy support linked with Enfeeble, which gives me the green aura you've seen around my character, which gives any nearby enemies less damage and less accuracy rating. So it's also a very good defensive mechanic that you can utilize on this character. And the last aura is Hatred, which gives you 35% of physical damage as extra cold damage. So it's purely a damage setup. That is all the important gem links, but I have chosen to do a cast when damage taken, summon Flame Golem for some slight increased damage, and have it on the cast when damage taken makes it so you don't have to summon it. It gets summoned by the gem. It's a quality of life for more damage. When you reach the end game with this build, there is a lot of good uniques you can look to invest into. The Lion's Roar Granite Flask is one of those. The Granite Flask base will grant you armor, which is physical damage reduction, and you will gain 30 to 35 more melee physical damage during effect, and knocks back enemies in an area of flask use, which makes it a good both defensive and offensive flask to utilize. The Serious Disfavor Axe is the endgame weapon if you have the currency for it. It's a very high physical DPS axe, and it also causes bleeding on hit, so it's a lot more damage than the Com's Primacy. If you invest into an Serious Disfavor, I would recommend the Witchfire Brew Stibnite Flask, because the damage over time on the flask scales the bleeding, and the Vulnerability Curse aura that you get also scales the bleeding and your physical damage. Of course, if you get this flask, you need to drop the Blasphemy and Enfeeble setup, and probably do like a Herald of Ash or anything like that you would prefer instead as an aura. Now, the Comb's Heart is the best in slot chest beast for this build. Mainly it has a lot of life, but as you can see it has no sockets, which means you will have to drop some of the gems setup that I've mentioned. I would probably recommend dropping the cast when damage taken setup and the Ancestral War Chief setup. Steel Ring is a very strong base that you can look into invest in the end game. The required level to use one is level 80, so it's very far into the end game. But the physical damage base can boost your damage very much. Now, this helmet here is something some people like to utilize for the high dexterity mainly, but also the movement speed. Also the chaos res helps a lot when you are a life-based build, but this build does need some dexterity for the faster attacks, gems, and so on. But I have chosen to not use this helmet because it does not have life on it, and in hardcore you want life on every gear piece you can. So I have chosen to itemize dexterity on the amulet and some in the skill tree instead. I am now going to demonstrate the build in a map. This map right here has both extra damage and some stats that makes the mob tanker the monster elemental resistance, so I think it has good stats to show you what the build is capable of. I am currently level 86, so yeah, let's get into it. This is a tier 8 map, by the way. Slight lag loading into the... Okay, so here are the porcupines that I mentioned earlier. These can kill you pretty easily if you kill a lot of them at the same time. So that is why I casted Enduring Cry and then Immortal Call. As you probably noticed, I reached my maximum endurance charges on my first cast, so the endurance charge generation is very reliable. This is a breach. This is a character in the breach league, and as you can see, mobs die fairly simple. Takes only 1 or 2 hits to kill the mobs in here. Let's focus down the big guys. No problem at all putting down the Ancestral War Chief Totem and a Wall Lightning Trap for single target capabilities. I'll go back for the loot later. I'm just gonna go through the map to the boss now. Actually, let me demonstrate Physical Reflect on that mob. As you can see, this is a Physical Reflect mob, and the damage from the Physical Reflect was not a big issue, but the Volatile for sure was. It was a tanky mob and a extra fire damage on the map. I chose to face tank the Volatile just to demonstrate some additional damage. You definitely want to use the Ancestral War Chief Totem to take down those volatile monsters, because like you saw, they can deal a lot of damage. So while playing this build, you probably want to leap into packs like this. Oh, that's Porcupine. So I'm activating Immortal Call a lot more than I would in a normal map in here because of the porcupines. But yeah, this is the general playstyle of the build. You leap into a pack to gain the endurance charges and pop Immortal Call versus these guys, then keep on leaping. You gain a lot of frenzy charges through the Blood Rage and attack speed, which helps your clear speed a lot. This should be the boss room up here. So I'm going to socket the Consecrated effect for more single target capabilities. Take care of the blue monsters first and then look out for that charge attack. Then put down the totem and go in. Now totems are fairly tanky, so it was a bit of a slow kill, but yeah, you get the picture of the build in general. One thing I failed to mention earlier in the build is the Serious Promise Amethyst Flask. This grants 2% of chaos damage, leech as life, and you gain a percentage of your physical and elemental damage as extra chaos damage. It's a very cheap flask, very cheap damage upgrade, and some survivability through the leech and the amethyst flask base chaos resistance. So yeah, that has been the Earthquake Juggernaut build. If you have liked it, feel free to leave a comment, or if you have any questions about the build, of course. Also consider subscribing and checking out the stream, twitch.tv/Efriko, going to be linked in the description down below as well. Going to link the entire leveled skill tree of this build as well. So yeah, hope you've enjoyed it.